Welcome. Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to Tuesday night at the Work Center. We have a virtual event this evening, and I'm so glad that you're here. We're going to take a few minutes and let everyone get settled, let all of our attendees funnel in. We've got a wonderful audience that will be joining us tonight. So I want to thank you for supporting. Let me mute my other screen. Excellent. I want to thank you for supporting the Work Center through this virtual event series. Tonight we are thrilled to have a wonderful group of panelists. So let's see, we're almost all here, all very prompt tonight. That's great. I'm going to quickly go over our webinar tools for communication. So there's two. You can use the chat icon that's located at the edge of your screen, either on the bottom if you're on a laptop, or at the top if you're on a mobile device. You can also use the Q&A button. Q&A button is great for questions, or if you need any technical assistance, I'll be here the whole time to help you out. And if you have any comments, you can use the chat. I'll write back to you, our panelists can write back to you. If you want to let us know where you're joining in from, just type in your town and I'll read them out so we can all have a sense of the audience tonight. I'll wait for a few of those to come in as we get the last of our participants connected to the Zoom call. And Rhinebeck, San Francisco, East Bay, California, Milwaukee, Salt Lake City, New York City, Occidental, California, Fort Lauderdale, Cleveland, Los Angeles, Plymouth, Mass. Let's see, am I missing anyone? Yeah, oh, Tucson, Philadelphia, Gurnee, Illinois, Ossining, New York, Baltimore, Maryland, Columbus, Ohio, Acton, Mass. Oh my gosh, wonderful. So lastly, if we lose connection, those things happen, don't panic, take a breath, click on your link. It'll take you right back into the webinar. And like I said, I'm here for any technical needs. So without further ado, I'm going to pass the mic over to my colleague, Kelle Groom.
Thank you, Naya. Welcome to the Work Center's virtual series. I'm Kelle Groom. Thanks for joining us. We are thrilled to partner with 4-Way Books tonight to bring you Martha Rhodes, Mark Conway, Gregory Pardlo, and Victoria Redel. 4-Way Books is now well into its third decade, publishing important, surprising, and potent works for readers. So I encourage you to not only read the work of our presenters here tonight, but take a look at 4-Way Books' impressive full catalog online. I'm going to be introducing our presenters, and then I'll turn the program over to Martha. Martha Rhodes is author of 5 poetry collections, most recently The Thin Wall from University of Pittsburgh. As director of 4-Way Books, she's published authors such as Reginald Dwayne Betts, Andrea Cohen, Cynthia Cruz, Yona Harvey, John Murillo, and all of our presenters here tonight. She teaches in the MFA program at Warren Wilson College and Sarah Lawrence College, and she lives in New York City. Mark Conway's third book of poetry, Rivers of the Driftless Region, was published by 4-Way Books in 2019. His work has appeared in the Paris Review, Slate, Boston Review, APR, Kenyon Review, Plowshares, PBS NewsHour, and Bomb. He teaches at the Loft in Minneapolis, and he lives in rural Minnesota. Gregory Pardlo's collection, Digest, won the 2015 Pulitzer Prize for Poetry. His other honors include fellowships from the Guggenheim Foundation, the NEA, New York Foundation for the Arts. His first collection, Totem, was selected by Brenda Hillman for the APR Hahnemann Prize in 2007. He's poetry editor of Virginia Quarterly Review, and he teaches in the graduate writing program at Rutgers Camden University. Air Traffic, his memoir in essays, was published in 2018. Victoria Redel is the author of 3 books of poetry and 4 books of fiction, including her newest novel, Before Everything, from Viking Penguin. With 4-Way Books, she's published the poetry collection, Woman Without Umbrella, and the story collection, Make Me Do Things. Her work has been widely anthologized, translated into 11 languages. She's on the faculty of Sarah Lawrence College. So Martha, thank you. Turning it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kelly and Naya, and the Work Center at large. The Work Center has been long supportive of me and of Four-Way Books and many of our authors and authors-to-be. And it's wonderful to be here tonight with Victoria, Mark, and Greg, authors whose work I truly admire. And I've actually worked with all three of these particular authors as their editors for the books with Four-Way. So that's also, you know, I have a really deep respect and love of the books that we've published with all of them, with all of you. I'm here tonight. I'm going to read, we're all going to read for just a short amount of time, and then we're going to talk about revision and how we teach revision and our thoughts about it. Because there are people here who may have signed up for the classes this summer and may join us next summer. So I thought we'd have that conversation. I'm reading new work, very much in progress. They could hear. From the beginning, that was only my beginning, I don't presume it was anyone else's, I was difficult. No one came forward to nurse or clean me. Ashamed to look away, they could not look at, for I was, if not horned and befouled, repugnant, reminding them of the ever-suppressed collective nightmare. Even in their most naked moments, barely awake before coffee and eggs, dawn just beginning to melt the crust at their eyes, they heard my squalls and pretended I was yet to arrive into their lives. I was still just a swelling for those few moments, a happy promise. From the beginning, I was demanding and insatiable. I ate through carpet, pearls, quilts, and pets. I demolished bank accounts and shat out snakeheads. I remember, a beast, unsoft, rancid, my milk teeth pointing in all directions. I was at home in their root cellar, hayloft, dung pile, pig slop bucket. Call me suey, scarecrow, gaseous, fungal spread. I'm not self-loathing here. I do not ask to be convinced otherwise. You are my sister. You knew I belonged townships away, the lodge. Send it to the lodge, they'd whisper through their sheets. But I'd made that impossible, having snuck through the portal to smear my waste on those walls and across the sleeping foreheads of its occupants. My signature. You see, I wanted to stay with you, my loved ones, and yet it was I who buried you. There is no why, save that from my beginning, I was difficult. If only it wasn't so difficult to smother a difficulty, they'd say through my crib sheets. I tried to make it easy for them, loving them enough to keep trying to make it easy for them. I rose up again and again to meet the pillow held above my head. Out of sorts, rondeau. What's in the air, what's stalking me that wasn't there, until it's free, just as the wind picked up that barn and settled it onto another's farm? Or did I dream this malevolency? Admittedly, I'm out of sorts, and all this week I've wanted to lash out at those who speak as if there's nothing. Don't be alarmed, it's a gentle day, you won't be harmed, it's in your mind, you've never been happy. Those who know nothing say that to me? There's an evil out there, the air's no balm. Stop trying to soothe me, I won't be calmed. A gentle day, I won't be harmed. Recurrent immersion. I was aware of the cave's airiness, bats beating the currents hot, the tide pushed up against us. Fish bombarded my knees and thighs, no shelf for me to lift up to, every kind of fish imaginable. You know my aversion to them. Worse, my terror, the shiny, wet, scaly, eye-popping, mouth-opened, leaping out of the water at me fish. And the deepening brine absolutely teemed with them, their sharp teeth glaring. I counted every one with my eyes closed. I told myself, they are only an inch long. They are oblivious to you. You will survive this episode. That's all it is. The others are not afraid, so why are you? They're even enjoying the swim. Think, why are you afraid? What sludgy hideousness happened to you to make you this afraid? Oh, it doesn't matter. Swim. Grow up. But then frogs entered the pool and the water boiled thick with them. 50 exactly landed on my head all at once. You must remember, don't you, my aversion to them, their croaking, their green sliminess, their ability to jump, land, slide, and land again. So of course there were frogs in the up to my neck by now pool. All other things wet dove in, an explosion of wetness. You also entered, trillions of you upon my shoulders, between my legs, spawning in my ears. How bear this one more second, knowing it was only the beginning of the pool's beginning and me in it. Embraced. I visited an ancient redwood and heard it creak as I've rested my cheek and ear against its trunk. It has received my deepest sobs and my hundreds of fingerings along its soft bark. Leaning into it, I have whispered to my most darling ones, Mother, Lucy, my multicolored cats, as if they've coursed through the tree's vascular system to form an inner stream, their happy noise so audible. I've stopped at the tree for hours over years in the shadow of Mount Tam, and I've napped at the tree's base, inebriated by the moldy brew of its memories, boiled up to commingle with the mist of my breathings, so that I must slow, resist rushing past, to recall the pattings of creatures before me, as well as my own over years. I always like to pretend the tree has fashioned a thick, fresh bed of fallen needles, especially for me. Today, as I walk the loop around Bontempe Lake, I hear the loud and familiar hello from the tree. Its creak long, bent-like, and old. I know the tree has ushered me back to remind me that it has, in particular, missed me. The tree wants to know where I've been these past 11 years and where I wish to go and where I think I will go. Thank you so much for listening. And I will pass the baton on to Mark Conway.
Thank you, Martha. What an amazing reading. You can see what a privilege it is to have someone like that as your editor, where you just can't get wild enough. It's incredible work. It's really great to hear. And so much fun to read with my friends and to be with all of you. So hello. Love being part of the Four Way Books family, as well as Fine Arts Work Center. Thanks, Kelly, for your introduction, and hope to be there next year with you all. I'm going to read from my Four Way book. If you can see that in the light, beautiful cover by Ryan Murphy. And in thinking about what to read in these days, the first thought, of course, was apocalypse, and then the second was summer. So all the poems are going to revolve around those couple of issues. In the remaining, dreaming of summer, it's summer. The lake slips inside the doubling sky, pulls it through the trees. In the aftershock of silence, but there is no silence. Now honeysuckles shoot their cream inside the intricate beaks of hummingbirds, hovering above their blurred and honeyed lives. We're away from men, Beetles rise in peace while the air weighs less than less. The trees drift off, blaze, and liquefy. We couldn't help but find it beautiful. The earth, sick and soon to die. Children see the world has ended many times. All the bridges falling and falling, they keep falling down. Midsummer, sunset, it's early in the end of days. Apo means without, calypse, to cover. Apocalypse, uncovered, the veil falls down. Now that we can see, in our eyes, the nights, the skies, the lake is falling through. More apocalypse, more summer. In the pines, the world is fire again today. Summer pours through our eyes, ignites behind the face of everyone we meet, and glances off my shining suit of light. July, silkscreen to the skin. The bedroom's flat fan wastes all our requisition wind. Long day's sun drinks gin, then burns the dawn to stumps. My four souls lie down, overheated from the past. Good dogs, they watch me, panting in the shade. Children tear through another week of empty street, make us trek to Hermit's Point, where we throw ourselves into the unspeakable, the local unclean lake. The small ones, bored, run up the beach, dripping off their fire. Here is the new life, burning like the old life. And in the light. But still down the plain back road, your unlived lives hive and clog the trailing mind. To see as if the light went right through you. To hear as if birds called through you. To see the dream, to see it's not a dream of what's to come, but what came. Your exhausted breath is sucked up by the oaks. You go on breathing as if you didn't know you were breathing, walking the road as if you had no idea what it's like not to be alive. And then finally, this one takes place in a canoe, but there's still some apocalypse. Don't worry, it's on the bayou, where the fish were bent, thinking they're saved by light, curving through the shallow's upper stories. Waves dissolve the silhouettes, drifting beneath the fish hawk, out, circling, before it drops, turning into the living light. Off the bay, the creek begins its clarity, sways off in a twisting sling of mud. We drift through a hole into the prairie, pulled by the current's slowly beating heart. At the end of the hollow dark, trees burn in a pyre of light, the fire world of noon. We ride on the water air back into the flames. On the surface of the green earth, the only things we see through and still see. Thanks, I'll pass it on to Victoria. Vic.
Okay, I'm unmuted. Am I there? Yeah. Hi, everyone. That was great. I'm so happy to be part of something from the Fine Arts Work Center and also Four-Way Books. And I'm going to read from a new manuscript that's actually going to come out with Four-Way Books called Paradise. So these are also new poems. And it's about expulsions, migrations, through time, through history, in the body. So the first poem is The Border. There was a gate, and through the gate, another garden. Same grasses, clover, gentian, violet, and lily. And the dry winds also made those willows sway. Just that rusty gate, the dirt beneath scraped when it hinged open, then shut. And some claimed one side was paradise. Speaking of men, then begin the exemptions. My sons, your brothers, grandfathers who left with nothing, a neighbor boy who put hands to where hands had been put on him, the drugged boy, beaten boy, hunted boy, lost boy, starved boy, forgotten boy, skittish boy, boy of a mother who had 3 jobs, soft boy, strapped down boy, transit boy, boy who watched what should never be watched, boy given the gun, boy who can't sleep remembering what was done and what he did when the burnt sky fell and he saw the other broken boys scatter and begin to run. Several of the poems have similar titles, and this one's also called Border. In the last days, when he could barely open his eyes, he'd look up from the bed sent by Medicare, lift his hand and say, "That's me." And thinking he wanted reassurance, we said, "Yes, Papa, you're right here." "No," he said, jabbing his finger toward the television. Clusters of makeshift tents bent under gusting winds, a woman pressing a child over the rail of a listing boat, a girl blanketed in her father's jacket. And he pointed at young men slouched against stone walls. "No," he said, waving towards men, refugees, browner and blacker than he. "You think you don't see me there?" he said. "You look again." This poem is called Occupation. My mother bled when the Germans entered Paris. She was 9 years old. The red rust skid ran a wet track in her underpants, like a tire mark from the soldiers' motorcycles stationed at the corner of Rue de Messine. How could she tell her parents? How could she tell anyone she was in love with the handsome soldier who squatted next to her to scratch Bijou's puppy ears? "You're a fine young lady," he said, impressed with her German. She'd been hit right then, kicked in the belly by the dimpled smile he smiled at her. Better than the smiles of all her first loves, Buster Crabbe, Carrie and Gary and Henri Garat. Wasn't this the truer cinema? He'd been commanded to kill her, but their love he can't fire, only wounds her. A bloody hurt no one else can see. She'd never tell. My mother washes out her cotton underpants, hides them to dry in the armoire, lies flat on the bed to quiet the blood. In the shuttered living room, her parents argue again. They could still get to Bordeaux. Maybe they'd been wrong turning back on the crowded road. Wasn't this occupation safer with their Persian papers? They wouldn't be forced to register. But my mother knows her soldier must know the truth. It's part of their beautiful tragedy to hold her injured in his arms as she confesses, "I'm a Jew. Natalie, darling," he'll say, "I'll always protect you." Pain sears between her legs. She nibbles Bijou's ears, his smile. She wants to tell her parents there's no reason to hide. She's rolled a new cloth to staunch the blood. And the last poem I'm going to read is called Only Paradise. It's about being older and the migrations of that body. Please know I would not strip back a single year from how we make love older bodied. Your hip arthritic and rhythmic as I twist above or below, creaked out knee, wrecked, racked, and us unrepaired, bone on bone, rocking ever closer toward arrival. I want to make this rickety spectacle our chosen extinction, our lights out, our no good night to go easy, final shebang. But enough pillow talk, darling, let's get serious and blow out what's left of our voluptuous minds. I'm going to turn it over to Greg Pardlo.
Wow. Thanks, Victoria. Thanks, Mark and Martha. Thanks, Kelly and Naya for having us and just stunning poems. Martha, you know, there's no thanking you. There's no limit to my thanks. My gratitude for the opportunity to read with you all. I'm going to read some new poems, 4 new shortish poems. I wonder if they might be a little dark, so just a heads up. I don't know, we'll see. So I've been working on a series of poems. The overall series is called On Faith, and I'm thinking about, I think about each poem as what I call giornata, which I understand in Italian means a day's work. And so I'm thinking about faith as a daily occupation, and these poems are kind of speaking to the obsession that, or the obsessive energy that maintaining or practicing some kind of faith requires. And of course, like anything, I can't really do faith on the nose, so that caveat is there too. Bud-sized flames popsicle the wicks of a wax 1 and 5, atop a Dominican cake. With tango arms, we hold the wedding knife, renew the annual jibes. Our marriage is old enough to get a job. Is it devotion or inertia that keeps us together? Why split hairs? Gut reno of the labyrinth, new plumbing in the hedgerows, do the shopping, feed the minotaur. I confess I've lost the thread of my life. I've thought to sacrifice the family pet because I couldn't bear to see it die. Isn't love a kind of fear? I fantasize before our mingled breath exhausts the candles, an undiscovered island of Whitney Houston's, their irrepressible refrain piercing the white caps and sea spray, their luminous eyes smizing from the distant shore, features merging as the swipe speed increases and blurs each face back into the one the bakery has airbrushed next to mine across this moist and delectable confection we now jab at each other's mouths, fork by fork. Well, let's just jump in. My father, Bacchus, wanted a daughter instead of me. He felt the threat a son implies and took you, my infant virility, scarf skin like a halo, angel of my innocence, four-fledged. Before there was you, there was guilt. You are vestigial as the divot where the angel pinched my lips in binding silence. Would I see myself in style or fit if I encountered you, my soul, draped on a fence post? You must be tattered like a moth-eaten turtleneck by now, hood like the hood of a headsman. If you were reappended, would you lisp like chiffon or crunch like corduroy? You are the macho my father's dream foretold. He who in the end was like a son to me, whose own member circumscribed a foreshortened life story mine was intended to resemble. My forebear, the brutal gardener. He who conjured the corona must have foreseen his own eclipse, and standing on ceremony, found at hand a means to get my sex to bleed. The swear jar isn't empty. Full of flowers instead of coins, it curses a bouquet of hate-me-nots, a tangled vine of credit extended to one most likely to default. Such a trifling bargain, flowers for mercy. Oh, nature, predatory lender. Risk is the commuter bus I'd ride between damnation and wonder, arrival and departure, both leading in the same direction. Give me chastity, O Lord, says the Berber saint. But stitch my wounds loosely, for miracle and sin are kindred. Each is hatched from a broken law. And finally, a poem from the larger project of, that I'm working on. Tituba. I know many of you know Tituba was the lone survivor of the Salem witch trials, of the accused within the Salem witch trials, but this was news to me in the last year or so, and I became really fascinated with her. Tituba. If not the labor, then the womb. If not the womb, a witch. If not a witch, a dead witch. Justice in search of a crime. To be hung for witchcraft in 1692, one need only deny guilt. And yet, of all the innocents, that she should live. In Judge Haythorne's court, what did she think to become? She could be a jellyfish floating in the fireplace, quicksilver in moonlight, the tumescence of smoke. Non-white and woman, she finessed those coordinates given to her like stigmata. After auction blocks and meeting house pews, the witness stand was child's play. Like the English peasant magic she learned to mimic, soluble as fact. She learned to be the genie in their mirror and assumed forms they'd comprehend, forms to feed the hunger of their judgment. She confessed. The night the dog's voice slowed from piccolo to profundo, she glimpsed the devil's registry. Feathered reptiles, each name pecked free as she tipped back her head and gave birth through her mouth like a god. Thank you. Thanks.
What a reading. I think it was splendid. And thank you all. Again, Kelly and Naya and the Work Center and Victoria and Mark and Greg. So I thought we'd just talk, each of us, briefly about our relationship to the revision process and teaching, and maybe a taste of what our workshop this summer might have been and will be next summer. I am convinced of it, that we will be in Provincetown next summer, vaccinated and healthy. So I can start. I liken revision often to playing the accordion. Kind of a poem starts here and it comes out and it gets smaller and it comes out, we add, we take out, many drafts. So I'm a nudge with people I work with. I nudge people to continue to look at their poems. And I often think about looking for lines within lines, stanzas within stanzas, for poems within poems. I am a big proponent of forcing myself, and it often feels like forcing myself to challenge the very scaffolding of a poem, to say, okay, here's my poem now. I'm gonna bust it absolutely freaking apart. and see what happens. Because I do believe that often what's on the page is talking to me and saying, Martha, look at me here. Look at me over here. Look at this word. Look at me. I'm the word red. Why in hell did you put the word red on the page? And then going with that. So I've trained myself. I'm always training myself. It's always new to keep looking. And that's what I hope, the message I hope to give people I work with. I am perfectly capable of making a suggestion that will screw up someone's poem, that will screw up my own poem. I'm perfectly capable of that. I believe strongly that revision can make a poem fall apart, make a poem worse. But what I do believe in is that bringing poems through draft after draft after draft makes us more athletic on the page, gives us muscles that we may not have even known that we had or may not be using of late. And so we learn through moving around on the page, challenging everything from our line length to our diction, to our syntax, to our pacing, to our typography, to everything, to become, more flexible. So I hope to encourage people I work with to, even though they feel married to a poem that may only be 5 minutes old, they feel married to it because they've been married to it for as long as they can remember. Let's see, Greg, their marriage to the poem is, how do I do it? Well, you know what I'm getting at. That's a great line from your poem.
Old enough to get a job, yeah.
Thank you. I knew the line. I didn't know how to fix it into what I was saying. Yeah, so even though we may feel very married to our poem, to work through that relationship and allow ourselves to move around in the poem. If we're in present tense, what happens if we go into future tense? If it's in first person, what happens if it goes into third person? If we're doing this, what happens if we do that? We're writing on 8.5 by 11. Let's turn the page around and write the lines 11 by 8.5. What happens if we work according to our temperament? What happens if we go against our temperament? We do not know how to write the poem, let alone revise it. We've never written it before. So we have to learn with each piece what to do. And we just kind of go through a list, whether we have to write the list down and refer to it, or we can just call it up. Our poems deserve that. So a lot of times people will say to me, Martha, you're not respecting the intention of my poem. I want my poem to be about this, 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 and this. And my answer is really from my heart, and I'm not being cavalier when I say, yeah, I am respecting the intention of your poem, but I'm asking you to respect the intention of a poem that may not yet be written, or the path, or go down a path that you may not know that you could possibly go down. So, in the words of my mentor, who will always be my mentor, she didn't ask for the job of being my permanent mentor, Ellen Bryant Boyd. In her words, it's all a draft until we die. And that's the gift of revision, that we can keep going. It doesn't mean, for God's sake, I'm an editor, I'm a publisher, we have to finish a poem. So we have to get a book out if we want to get a book out. And move to the next poem, move to the next work. So I'm not saying onward, ongoing draft, but don't come to me and complain because you've already done 3 drafts. So my workshop is about encouraging us all, me included. It's really important for me to teach because it keeps reminding me of these things, to keep looking and to look for possibilities. And the only way we can really see different possibilities is to turn work upside down, to do multiple drafts. It doesn't mean that we can't go along the path that we're already going on. but allow ourselves to go left, right, underneath, on top of, and just move and imagine. That's it in a nutshell for me. We're going to move on to Mark, and then Victoria and Greg, and then if there's time, we're going to welcome some questions from people or comments. Mark?
Yeah, that's great. I really like the image of the accordion. I think one of the things that I'm interested in transmitting to participants in a workshop is I love revision. I have a harder time creating new work. I mean, I love doing that, but it's rare. It doesn't last very long. So there's great joy in being able to move through the poem. I think you're right that there's oftentimes resistance, partially because it feels like there's a taking away. But pretty soon you learn that it's a lot about adding and, listening to the poem, practicing negative capability, seeing what's there, and moving toward that and allowing that to come out. Oftentimes it's going to be additive rather than that fear of having to dismember or take apart this precious thing that you've made. And I have to remind myself too that I enjoy revision, because sometimes I don't. But I thought of two adages I like to go to in teaching and also in my own work. One comes from Robert Irwin, the visual artist. He was an old LA guy back in the day. So he actually made a living for a while as a dancer, but not like he won dance contests of doing the Lindy through the night, that kind of thing. Fixed up hot rods. He grew up near a racetrack, and so he was a professional gambler for a while. So he had a phrase that caught me, where he talked about, there's all this lore about racing of horses that run well in the mud, or this length, or the jockey, and all that. And he certainly took all that into account as sort of some of the craft stuff that we think of. But he had this phrase where he would say at the end, before betting, he'd close his eyes and rub his hand over the race. And I just thought that was such a great way to think about what you can do with a draft. And so I literally do that, where I'll print out a poem and feel it. And where you can actually feel the low spots and the high spots. And you want both. It's just the heat and the cold and all. So you're locating the circulatory system of the poem by doing that. And if you don't have that kind of haptic sense, you can also write it out by hand. I think that's a really useful way to get it out, to see it, to involve your body with the poem as well. Obviously the breath is so important, but having that kind of manual connection to the poem, oftentimes your hand won't go along with what you want to write, to have in the poem. And then finally, a kind of a corollary to that is something by the amazing and much missed Lucy Brock-Broido would say. She would recall from a letter of a friend of Gerard Manley Hopkins, who wrote encouraging him to go to the terrible crystals. And so that phrase, I think, in many ways is analogous to what you find, those nodes of energy, by running your hand over the poem. But Lucy's insight that I thought was really useful is that there's oftentimes, that's the wildest part. The terrible crystals have so much built into them. There's oftentimes resistance, attraction. They dominate the poem. And so there can be the temptation, particularly in a workshop, to just get rid of that. And then the poem goes much easier. But really the trick is to go and interrogate that more deeply. Oftentimes you'll find it has the DNA for the whole poem in it. It's probably why it's sticking out so much to you as the poet, is that there's something that both attracts and repels at the same time. So that's what I wanted to say. Victoria.
Well, my friends have already been so smart. I'm not exactly sure what I want to add. So there's a lot of yes and yes to what Martha said and what Mark said. So I'll just jump in with a little bit. And one of it, has to do with, for myself, I'll start with myself because it's, I think, a good bit about how I try to work with students, which is I try to keep myself in a place of not knowing, right? You know, I feel like in so much of our lives, my life, I'm trying to show up and be a smarty pants of some way, just to manage the world, right? To manage walking through the streets, to go to the supermarket, to deal with any number of things. And the page, or actual composition, is a place to come to it not knowing. And that's a scary place to be, because it means arriving in a place of what it is I need to say, what it is I need to encourage of my students, that comes out of their urgency or my own urgency, but that I haven't done it a million times. I haven't already performed it in the world. It's not the obvious thing I know how to do. And that often, after you've written a bunch of poems, or after you've written a couple of books, there's a kind of poem I know how to write of my own. And so often a first draft kind of just gets that breath, right? Like, and it's a comfortable breath, and it's not as if it's not mine, but it's become a kind of safety zone for me. So I need to sometimes, with a first draft, figure out ways to disrupt that. And I do it sometimes by just really going back into you know, kind of games almost with myself. Like, I'll just like read every other line, like only the A lines, I'll read them and see if I can get rid of all the B lines, or only the B lines. Or I played a game, you know, if the poem has 20 lines in it, okay, you're only allowed on threat of death to keep 10 lines. Which ones are you saving, Victoria? And, you know, and you can only do that in 3 minutes. So obviously they aren't really gone. And if there's a word that feels like I've lost it and I want it, then I find it again. Inside of that, it's what's in the poem, but I'm also always looking for what I can omit from the poem. How the unsaid works inside of a poem. And also looking at what I've actually put down. So if there's, you know, what are the objects inside my poem? How can I continually not forget about them and move them through the poem, braid them through the work? I'm actually teaching online this week at the Work Center, and I have been driving my students nuts with the idea of kind of braiding things through, recycling them through, moving to think of the work as wild as it is. It's also economical, right? So it's recycled and reused. And all of those are just ways to kind of dig deeper into the unconscious, into the imagination, and into the language, this thing we actually is our only tool on the page, you know, these words we create and sentences we make. So a little bit. Greg, giving it to you, man.
Thanks. Yeah. Yes, and yes. So I think there are, I want to say 3 things that I want to talk about really quickly, but they're all kind of mashed together. I'm interested in the obsession. I agree, Martha, the original intention of the poem is something I'm really suspicious of. Not that I distrust it, but and I'm repeating what a lot of us have said so far, the original intention of the poem is often the safest mode for me to get into the thing I want to get to. I found myself, so where I am now in terms of teaching, and this will change most certainly next semester or beyond, is I find myself saying frequently, you have several poems here, right? I'm sure we've all said this. And so I kind of took that as a starting point, as an assumption that there are several poems in a single poem, and that my one revision process that I've been exploring lately with my students is to work from inside out. And so we'll write the one poem. I want to share, so the last poem that I read, host disabled screen sharing, okay. The one poem, the last poem I read, Tituba, was actually part of that whole On Faith series. And well, the whole faith, that whole Giornata idea started as a single long poem that I just kept breaking down and exploring and looking for the risky spots. And so the question that I often ask in a draft of myself is, what social comfort or privilege am I willing to sacrifice for this poem? And the thing, and that helps guide my attention toward the thing that most scares the shit out of me. And that's where, so back to this kind of original idea of the original intention of the poem. I want to get beyond what I thought the poem was about, or what I want the poem to be about, and get to the thing that is actually the most fascinating me, that is somewhere the pebble way back in the brain, urging that curiosity on. And the last thing I want to say is, I was told, I think a lot of us have this idea that we don't talk about our drafts, our work in progress. And I just recently started to flip that, and I've been talking ad nauseum about my projects. And what I find is the conversation is incredibly fruitful. And just so, and people are oddly incredibly generous in offering just conversation, right? When there's not a poem in front of us to kind of be delicate or concerned about. Just talking about it and talking through my ideas openly has been really helpful. And it takes kind of some of the preciousness off of those early drafts too. So yeah, I'll leave it there. Hopefully we'll have some time to talk some more.
Thank you. Thank you all. I think that we can open up to some questions, and they can come to us through chat, I guess. So if you guys out there, we can't see you right now, but if you want to chat to ask a question or say something via chat, that would be great. So to all of us, how has the pandemic, let me see, sorry, I just lost that. How has the pandemic affected our writing? Anybody want to answer that?
Yeah,
That's from Connie Post.
I'll try it first. At first it was, you know, discombobulating, and I found myself restless, and I found myself thinking that there was a big difference between this place that I normally sit at every day to try to get work done. So, you know, there's the question of my chosen solitude, which is, you know, what a writer loves to have, and a kind of quarantine solitude. And then I did what I thought was useful to me and has been useful, to think about how have I gotten through other rough times. And for me, creating a schedule, being kind of disciplined, having that, and kind of just setting it up and doing it, sitting down and saying, I know I'm going to work from this period and this period and this period. And so just relying on schedule, that's been mine.
Any other responses?
Well, really quickly, the pandemic, and I think I just briefly noticed a question about the uprisings and, you know, sort of political unrest. And I'm ordinarily an anxious person, and so there's a lot feeding my anxieties. And so what I try to do is to sublimate that energy and find, much like I was saying before, find the thing that seems most compelling for me. Where's the monster under the bed? And let's drag him out and interrogate it.
I think for me, one of the things that's happening is kind of having to fight against my own self by saying it's important to write whatever poems I write, and that there's no such thing as a small poem unless it's it's because of our poor management of our content, to not think I should be writing this content or this is unimportant, or this isn't the time for this kind of poem, or, oh, yet another, relationship poem or whatever. Some of us take the shovel and dig where we stand. Some of us shovel farther away from where we stand. And I have to constantly remind myself that voice that's saying, don't write about that, it's not important, is just a voice not to listen to. Let's see, there's some other questions here. Help me, somebody, okay. Marie is asking, Mark, has Tolstoy been an influence?
She's just joking because
okay.
of the pandemic has affected my hair. So she thinks I look like Tolstoy now.
Very funny. All right, so revisions. Can you give advice on how to teach a student to cut elevated language in a way that won't insult her? This is from Lisa. To all of us.
Well, I question the impulse to tell a student to cut anything. I would rather think about it as asking the student, well, what are you gaining through, what are you trying to gain through this elevated language, right? What is the source of the elevated language? What is, why, toward what are you trying to push this poem? And what are the models that you're chasing? And understanding that, there may be, I understand, your question is most likely the student is writing out of a sense of fidelity to some imagined ideal poet voice, right? So I understand that, but in some cases it could be that the poet is trying to find some deeper register of her own that is sort of carried in the frequencies of this, as we say, elevated voice. And so I would dig for something authentic. I know it's a buzzword, or more genuine, rather than just chucking it all together.
Yeah, and then another strategy is also to say, let's see what happens if you challenge your own, lexical choices, and see what happens if you work in a plain, unadorned language. Your version here isn't going to spontaneously combust. You can always go back to it. And maybe there will be a way to cut back on some, or even exploit the elevated language even more.
Right.
And see what that does. Again, that's going with the temperament and going against the temperament. And before we put the poem down as a finished poem, let's just keep challenging a little bit more. So I think that there are ways that you can do that, Lisa, without insulting the student. There's another question from Stacy. How much writing time or output do you need each week to feel whole? Do you write in shorter or longer sessions? We have about 4 minutes. Does somebody want to answer that? How much time you're putting in?
I'm writing as constantly as I can. My fear is that all of my time will evaporate very soon, and so I've been trying to steal as much time as possible. Which is to say, I will not have the opportunity to write as much as I am now. And so I think just like I said, the anxiety and the fear of not having this luxury is kind of motivating to me right now.
Yeah, I'm trying to write a lot, and I'm trying to read a lot, you know. I mean, that's one of the privileges of this moment, is that there aren't so many other places we need to be.
Yeah, same here. And so I do set aside a certain amount of time that's sort of the sacred time, but I have a ton of time right now. So that has expanded. I'm trying to write a lot and not worrying very much about output or measuring it. Trying to look for a balance between new things, scary things, as Greg was talking about, and trying not, I can waste a lot of time in revision as well, you know, sort of pretending that I'm writing, where I get interested in something. I'm more amusing myself really than revising. So, you know, being cognizant of that, but I have a lot of time right now. So I'm really spending a lot of time, as Victoria was saying, reading as well as writing, and just staying with it.
Yeah, I don't have a lot of time right now. I'm working for 4-Way Books 9 to 5. So I am taking time off in November for about 8 weeks. And it's the first time I've ever done that. And we'll see. Because I'm feeling a lot of, from the pandemic, the situation has actually created more work for me in terms of grant writing and fundraising and all that and stuff, and I feel incredibly stressed. So I'm just going to take time to for myself in November. And I think that we're just about at the hour. Brenda says, can poetry defeat Trump? And I'm sorry if we couldn't answer. I think we got pretty much everything, but
thank you for your amazing work, for the beautiful readings. Thank you, Martha, Mark, Victoria, Greg. What a great night. You can get copies of books by Martha, Mark, Greg, and Victoria at East End Books here in Provincetown. You can order online. They'll ship nationally. If you live on the Outer Cape, they'll deliver to your house.
Wow.
Yeah. So thank you so much for coming.